Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about how to give and receive feedback. And whether you realize it or not, you receive feedback every day.
Amen.
Okay? All of our lives, we've been thanked, we've been rated, we've been graded, we've been scored, we've been chosen, we've been accepted, we've been rejected. Right? We've been invited and we've been left out. And within all of those things, that's giving us certain feedback, right? Instruction, teaching, advice, correction, coaching, and encouragement are just a few ways where we give and receive feedback. And so giving feedback is a skill that needs to be learned. I'm going to say that again. Giving feedback and also receiving feedback is a skill that needs to be learned and practiced. Let me give you the definition of feedback. Feedback is a noun, and it's helpful information or criticism that is given to someone to say what can be done to improve a performance, product, or whatever. Right? I'm going to give you that definition again. Feedback is helpful information or criticism that is given to someone to say what can be done to improve a performance or product, right? Now, our growth and our success is really dependent on how we receive feedback, right? And how we give feedback as well. Exceptional teachers, supervisors, and mentors are rare, right? We can all agree on that. That's kind of rare. But if we can learn how to give feedback, but also how to receive feedback, no matter who is giving it, we're going to maximize our learning potential. And that's really important because no matter how old you are constantly learning.
That's right.
Okay? This is why we kind of deceive ourselves when we graduate high school or college and we think, no more learning, no more books. And it's like, nope, you still got to continue your own self-education, your own learning. So you're always going to be learning about something, right? Okay, so let's get started. Let me grab some water. Okay, so the first section we're going to talk about is how to give constructive feedback. Okay? Before you give feedback, there's one question you need to ask yourself. Does anybody know what that one question is? Take a guess. What's the one question that you need to ask yourself before you give somebody feedback, advice, encouragement, or whatever?
Why are you doing it?
Why are you doing it? It's perfect. Why am I doing this? That's the first question you got to ask. Because if it's for your benefit, if it's for you to feel better about yourself, you got to ask yourself, is that going to be a benefit to the person? Okay? The purpose of giving feedback is to improve a situation or someone's performance, right? Being critical, harsh, offensive, demeaning, or trying to embarrass someone will not improve a situation or performance. It may make it worse, or that person's going to completely ignore you, right? Feedback may not always feel good, right? But it should be fair. I'm going to say that again. Feedback may not always feel good, it may not always be good, but it should always be fair. Right? So here are some tips on how to give feedback. Right. The first one is timing. The closer to an event you address the issue, the better. And this is important, right? By addressing things quickly, you avoid a person from forgetting what they did. You don't want to bring up stuff that happened like 6 months ago. You don't want to bring up stuff that happened 4 months ago, 3 months ago, a month ago. You want to address something right away, as soon as you can address it, okay? While it's fresh in everybody's minds, you'll be more likely to receive your feedback or have the person that you're trying to give feedback receive it from you better, right? One exception to that is in a highly emotional situation. When somebody else is emotional or you're emotional or it's just really tense, that is not a time to be like, we need to talk about this. No, you need to calm down. And that person needs to calm down. So you have to let everybody kind of calm down, right? Get some time to think, and then you can go back and address it later, okay? But the closer to the event you address an issue, the better, right? Okay, the next is location. Why is location important? Because we sometimes get feedback when we're within a group or individually. But the best feedback is given when somebody knows how to give feedback in a group or individually. Because there are times where you're going to have to address things individually, and then there are times where you're going to have to address things within a group. Okay? Right. Public recognition is always appreciated, but public scrutiny is not. Right? Public feedback is also good when there is an issue that is affecting more than one person. Right? Sometimes the Lord here is correcting or giving instruction or feedback, mostly because more than one person is doing it. So that's when, the Lord's going to address everything, or have me address different things, because more than one person, and it's more than just 2 people. It's usually more than 3 people. It's more than like 4 or 5. Okay, it's like a lot of people are doing it. And also, when you are giving feedback within a group too, you have to learn about tone. Tone is everything, right? Because how somebody will receive your feedback is how they're going to receive your tone. You don't want to give feedback when you're angry, because you're going to have an angry tone, right? You don't want to give feedback sarcastically. Nobody's going to receive that, okay? Because sarcasm can come across as belittling, and you don't want to belittle somebody, right? Okay, so learning the right timing and when to give public and private feedback is going to take time, right? Usually when in doubt, do it privately. And then, you can kind of talk things out that way. Okay. I like to say this, and if you do make a mistake and your public scrutiny was a little harsh, apologize publicly. There's so many people that they do something wrong in public and then they try to apologize privately. So you want to make sure that if it's private, if it's public, it's public, right? Okay. All right. The third is the different kinds of feedback that you will be giving. Okay, the first one is appreciation. Now, appreciation motivates and encourages. That's where a lot of your gratitude is going to come from, right? That's appreciation. We have like a lot of volunteers here, the pastors. So a lot of thank you for your time, thank you for translating. We did the Mission of Light prophetic gathering call on Monday night, and Carmen is my translator, and Eric was helping out. And so afterwards, I appreciated them. I was like, thank you so much for taking your time and for translating and doing all of this, because they got a busy schedule. So that's one way that you can give feedback, is through appreciation, which helps motivates and encourages through gratitude. Okay? And before I get into the next two, Your feedback wants to be a balance of all three of these things that we're going to talk about, okay? So you're gonna have a mix of appreciation. The next is gonna be coaching, right? Coaching helps increase knowledge, skill, capacity, growth, or raises feelings in the relationship, right? This is where you're gonna say, here's a better way to do this, right? That's your coaching, okay? And then the next one is going to be evaluation. And this is where you tells you where you stand, aligns expectations, and informs about decision making, right? So in evaluation, that tells you where you stand, okay? So we have appreciation, which is motivates and encourages through gratitude. You have coaching, okay? And this is, here's a better way to do this, right? And then evaluation, and this is tells you where you are at, right? Learning which one to use and when to use it comes with time and practice. But you're going to mix, it's going to be a balance between all three of these, appreciation, coaching, and evaluation, right? Depending on the relationship, you might be using more appreciation. Say, marriage, right? You want to give a lot of appreciation to your spouse, right? Thank you. Come on, no more, no comments from the peanut gallery, okay? Because this appreciation is giving feedback to your spouse of what's good. What you appreciate about them. Like, thank you, honey, for doing those dishes. Thank you for vacuuming. Thank you for, doing the laundry. I really appreciate that. You're giving them the feedback of, wow, this is really speaking to me, and I like when you do that, right? Instead of complaining. Why don't you ever do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you wash the dishes? It's like, you're not going to receive that feedback because it's, number one, critical. It's judgmental, and it's nagging. But if I turn that around and I give more appreciation, then usually what happens is people like to be appreciated, right? Mm-hmm. So when they are given appreciation, they're going to do it more, right? Great tool for kids as well, right? Yeah. And then you have coaching. Coaching is going to be, you might be using this style with your children, right? Here's a better way to do this. Or, wow, I really liked how you did that. Let's tweak it because this can make it really better, right? And then evaluation is where you stand again. You might be using a lot of evaluation in your feedback at work, right? Especially if you supervise people. Okay. All right. Number 4 is when you give feedback, you want to be specific. People respond better to specific, positive direction. So you're going to tell the person exactly what was specifically good and what needs improvement. You want to avoid saying general comments like, that was awful. Well, what was awful? The whole thing was awful, or was it my clothes awful? Did I say something? So you want to avoid general comments when you're giving feedback, and you want to be specific. But there's a balance between what was good and what needs to be improved, right? If you tell someone that they acted unprofessional, what does that mean? Right? Like, your behavior is just so unprofessional. Okay, well, what does that mean? Because that can mean different things to different people, Was this person too loud? Were they too friendly? Were they too casual? Were they too flippant? Were they poorly dressed? That it can cover a whole bunch of things. So when you're giving feedback to somebody, you want to be specific, okay? Also, when you're giving feedback, you want to stick to what you know firsthand. I'm going to say that again, because a lot of people are struggling. Even journalists are struggling with this. Different people, It's like, well, I heard from so-and-so, or I heard from an anonymous source. That's not how you give feedback, okay? You don't want to give feedback based on somebody else's issue, right? You want to stick to what you know firsthand, right? And you don't want to use feedback or give feedback based on what other people say unless it confirms what you saw or experienced yourself. Right? Because I've had a lot of people say to me, well, all of us, who's all? Because 2 people in a group of 20 is not all. So you want to be careful that you're not trying to generalize so that somebody can receive you better. Usually that's what happens when people say, well, all of us. Well, it isn't all of you, because did you talk to everybody? Well, no, I didn't talk to everybody. Okay, so then it's not all. So you want to be careful with the absolutes, right? The all, everyone, it's like, you want to speak for yourself, okay? Right? One way to do this is to use I statements, right? And I statements are really good to use, and I teach kids how to use I statements. I don't know what's going on with the computer, but okay. It probably just switched over. Go to settings, and it probably switched over to extended. So anyway, let me keep going here. We're still on being specific when we give feedback, right? So one way to help you is to use I statements. So this will help you give feedback based on your perspective, right? Now, when you give an I statement is, I feel blank when you did blank, okay? So I feel blank when you did blank. Hallelujah. So you get distracted by that. Focus on me. All right. So I statements are, I feel blank when you did blank. And then the next sentence after that is, I would like you to do this, okay? Or I think, sometimes there's a lot of misunderstanding. It's like, when you said this, I heard this. Is that correct? Right? Feedback is about starting a conversation, right? And it's about dialogue. It isn't just you giving all of your feedback and then the other person doesn't say anything. You really want a conversation to be started when you're giving feedback, okay? So like I said before, you also want to avoid words like never or always, because it's never, and it's not always, okay? Like we sometimes want to use those words so that, because we're feeling very passionate about a certain issue, so we want the other person to be passionate, so we're like, you always, when it's not really always, right? It's like, they might do it a lot of the time, but it's not all of the time, right? So you want to avoid words like that. Also, the reason why you want to avoid those words is because the person that you're trying to give feedback to is going to get defensive. And a defensive person is not going to receive what you're saying, right? But just imagine you being defensive. Are you hearing anything the other person is saying? Not at all. You're trying to come up with your argument, right? Okay, so you want to avoid those. You want to avoid always, never, or all of us, okay? All right? Also, when you're giving feedback, you want to be specific. Start with something positive, right? When you start with something positive, this shows a person what success looks like. And that's important, because you want to give them that, okay, this is what success looks like, and then you can move into an area where they're struggling, so that it's not everything that you're doing isn't all wrong. Right? When you come up and you guys do your righteousness teachings, I tell you what you did well and what you can work on. Because it's not all bad, right? I don't think I've ever had to do this, but sometimes you can run across a situation where it's really hard to find that one good thing, okay? I'm a trained social worker, and I wish I would have found the picture. But one of my classes, professor put up a picture. It was a picture of a woman sitting on a couch, and the child was playing on the floor. But there was it was dirty, it was cluttered, toys all over the place, there was exposed outlets and all this stuff. And the professor said, okay, what's good about this picture? And when you first look at it, it's nothing's good. What are you talking about? But it's take a moment and take a breath and look, what is good in this picture? And it's there's an adult in the room. Okay. The child has toys to play with. Okay. There's food in the house. Okay. So it sometimes it takes a little bit to see the good, but there is always good there. Okay? That's where you want to start with the good to show a success, and then you can move into and talk about areas that somebody might be struggling with or a team member might be struggling with and how you can help them. Okay? Whenever you give feedback in an area that somebody might be struggling with, you don't want to just say, okay, so you need to fix that. How? How can they fix that? How can they get better with that? What are you going to do to help them? Because again, you don't want to just give feedback just criticizing somebody and then say, yeah, good luck. You better fix that. Because they're not going to do it. They're just going to be well, I don't even know what that means. And they're going to keep doing what they're doing, right? So when you are giving feedback with somebody in an area that they are struggling with, make sure that you can show them or give examples of what a success will look like. Okay? Right. Also, you want to avoid sandwiching constructive feedback between too many positives. Because the takeaway should be, I'm doing well in this area, but I need to bring up in another area. It's not, oh, I'm doing pretty good overall. All right, cool. So that's why you want to avoid sandwiching positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, right? You could do, your positive feedback and then go into the areas where people can improve upon, right? All right. So stick to firsthand. Don't give feedback. Don't start giving feedback based on what other people said. That's so important. You can't. If you don't take away anything, take away this. Okay. All right. So the next, number 5 is prepare your comments. This really helps you really think about what is really the issue. Because when you don't prepare comments, you can kind of open up stuff that you yourself are not really prepared to talk about. So when you do want to go and talk to somebody and give them feedback, you want to take some time and you want to prepare your comments, okay? You don't have to read from a script. You don't have to give them an outline and do a PowerPoint presentation, okay? That's good for a classroom. But if you want to talk to a spouse or a child or even a coworker, just jot down a few things that you want to talk about and some things that you want to say, okay? And then also, hold on. And then this moves to number 6. You want to limit your focus to 1 to 2 issues at a time. All right? When you're giving feedback, especially in areas where somebody is struggling, You don't give all your positive and then 10 negative things that they need to, work on. Stick to one or two. Every time you're having a talk, or you want to space it out, okay? Because a person can only handle one or two things to change at a time, and it's going to take some time for people to change. Okay. When you have to schedule a meeting and discuss issues, you don't want to overload this person with everything that they're doing wrong and that they have to fix. One or two issues is actually the maximum that somebody can handle in regards to something that they're not doing correctly. Just think about yourself. Okay, when somebody's telling you, this, unless it's like really simple things, right? But if it's like a major issue, really just stick to one, so that they can, really, okay, let me work on this. And then later on, once that person has gotten over that and they're doing better, then you can move on to the next issue. Right? And it doesn't really matter what the other person says, because a lot of people will say, well, just tell me everything. They don't want everything. And they might say, no, it's okay. Just tell me everything that I need to be fixed. No, they don't want everything. Like I said, when you guys get evaluated here on Wednesday nights to do your teaching, I don't tell you everything. And it's based on each individual person and where they're at. I don't tell you everything. Because if I told you everything, some of you would cry. For real. I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not, trying to make a joke. But it's like, all right, Lord, what do you want to point out? What are the good things that they're doing? And then what are some of the things that they need to kind of focus on for the next time that they get up? All right? So, because number one, that's what you're going to remember. And number two, you're going to need some time to kind of digest it and then figure out how to do that. Because sometimes some feedback that you get is unnatural. You don't see it at all. I have no idea what this person is talking about. That's why you want to give like some examples as well, so that they can see what a success looks like. Okay? Okay. Remember, the purpose of your feedback is to help people grow and succeed. I'm going to say that again. The purpose of your feedback, irregardless of your relationship, is to help people grow and succeed. Okay? All right. So you want your feedback to be constructive so that people can go back, they can think about it, and then they can ultimately implement it. Right? Okay. Also, when you are giving feedback, always remember, this is not going to be the first and only conversation you're going to have with somebody. This is why you only want to cover one or two things at a time, because this is going to be a constant conversation that you'll have with your spouse, with your children, with your coworkers, right? With church members, all of that. So these are conversations that you're going to have over and over and over again. So you don't have to worry about, what if they don't do this? What if they don't do that? Simply ask the Lord, okay, Lord, what is it number one, what's the real issue, and what's the one thing that that really needs to be changed right now? Okay? And since I'm gearing this towards, Christians, you want to make sure that you pray about what feedback to give, regardless of who the person is. Okay? Because you might think your spouse or your kids have to work on A, and God is saying, no, it's D. And you're like, but no, A. Because A is really getting on my nerves, right? But again, it's not about you, right? It's about seeing this person grow and succeed. So if God says they need to work on D right now, once they work on D, then we can go over to A, then it's like, okay, so since this is not about me and this is about the other person growing and succeeding, you want to trust where the Lord is leading you and what he wants you to talk about. Okay? Any questions about that part? Clear? All right. So then the next thing we're going to talk about is how to receive feedback. And I'm going to read you a quote. On the second page of your handout, you have a list of resources. And one of the books that I used for this was Thanks for the Feedback. And it's really how to receive feedback regardless of how it's given to you. And so this is one of the quotes that I found on there, which was really good. This is regarding how to receive feedback. Training managers how to give feedback, how to push more effectively can be helpful. But if the receiver isn't willing or able to absorb the feedback, then there's only so far persistence or even skillful delivery can go. It doesn't matter how much authority or power a feedback giver has. The receivers, listen to this, the receivers are in control of what they do and don't let in. How they make sense of what they're hearing and whether they choose to change. And that is so important because so many people think that, well, I just have to have more authority, or I just need a higher position for people to listen to me. No, it's not about position. It's not about authority, right? It's how are you giving that information for a person to receive it. Because if you're giving it in a way where a person isn't going to receive it, it doesn't matter who you are or what you are doing. They're in control of what they're going to do. Okay? So don't let the enemy come in and tell you, well, you see, if you were the manager, they would listen to you. No, they wouldn't. It might look like it because you're the manager, but people usually just do their own thing. Right? So we're going to cover 4 points that's going to help you be a good receiver. Okay? Hallelujah. Because how many want to receive feedback to grow and succeed?
Amen.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. Okay. So, how to receive feedback. Number 1. You want to separate the do from the who. When you are getting feedback, don't take it personal. Okay? Because feedback is based on performance and actions, not identity. And many times this is where people get stuck because they're getting feedback from somebody and they're believing that this person is attacking them, attacking their identity, right? Now it could be because of how they're saying it, but if you're getting good feedback, right, that feedback is going to be based on your performance and your actions and not your identity. Okay? Now, there are going to be times where you are going to get feedback based on your behavior. And it should be behavior that isn't constructive, right? That's not getting you what you want, okay? Like if you get angry and you yell a lot, that's behavior that needs to change because when you yell and get angry, people aren't hearing you, really. And it's kind of a false sense of authority when people are yelling and screaming because, yeah, you might have somebody's attention, but they're really not listening to you. Right? Okay. So one way to help keep feedback from getting too personal is to realize and understand that feedback is about your performance and your actions. Can't say that enough, right? Not your identity. The best feedback is all about what we do, not who we are. Right? Okay, so then this leads us to number 2. When we are getting feedback, and you're starting to get a little defensive, okay? You want to ask clarifying questions, right? So in order to receive feedback, and really general questions rarely lead to specific answers, okay? What do I mean by that? You want to avoid asking questions of, do you have any feedback for me? Because that's not going to get you the information that you want, right? I get that question a lot. Do you got any feedback for me? No? Okay. But see, you're looking for something. So you want to ask specific and clarifying questions. What do you want feedback on? Right? So like if somebody is doing prayer and you want feedback, it's like, Pastor, so what did you think about the first part of prayer? Because I was kind of struggling on the topics. Did you have peace with those? See, that's a specific question to get a specific answer, right? Okay, so you want to ask clarifying questions, right? Okay, instead of, okay, yeah, I did that. All right, and again, and I know sometimes it's hard and it takes a lot of practice, but you want to avoid getting defensive. Because remember, feedback is to help your performance and your actions, right? And whether you realize it or not, you are performing when you're at home. I'm not talking about acting or, all of that. You are doing things at home, right? You're doing things at work. And so you're going to get feedback based on your performance, what you do, okay? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about performance, like your actions. What are you doing, okay? So when you start to get defensive, you want to start training yourself to ask more specific questions. Like, okay, that's really pushing my buttons. You don't want to say that out loud. You just said, it's really pushing my buttons. What do you mean by that? Can you tell me more? Can you give me a specific example? Okay? As they start giving you more information. So this way, it's all about, and you can direct and ask your questions based on your performance. You can help direct the person that's giving you feedback by the questions you ask them, right? That's kind of another way of leading up. Everybody's a leader, but you might not have a leadership position. So one way you can help lead up is to ask questions to get specific feedback. But again, tone is everything. You don't want to ask sarcastic questions, right? It's like, some changes at work can happen. You don't want to ask, so how are we supposed to get all our other work done? Come on, you're not going to get, a really good answer, right? So you want to ask specific questions so that you can get the information that you need so that you can do your job better. Right? You want to ask specific questions in your relationship so that you can be a better partner. You want to ask specific questions so that you can be a better parent, right? This is all about growth and succeeding, right? When we start taking on that mentality, giving and receiving feedback is something that you start to crave instead of avoid. Right? And like I said before, feedback should be a conversation engaging both parties, not just one-sided. Okay? So this is why you want to ask those clarifying questions. You want to go, what do you mean by that? Can you give me an example? Right? And then, so that leads us to, number 3, don't dread feedback, crave it and seek it out. And so many people want to avoid it. But in avoiding feedback, we're avoiding growth because feedback helps us grow, right? Now, we don't always like to admit that feedback, advice, and instruction help us grow, but it does, right? If you're doing something wrong and you're not corrected, you're going to keep doing those things wrong, right? Right? Okay. But let me tell you, there's a misconception when it comes to feedback, And I'm going to read you another quote from the book, Thanks for the Feedback. Right? Receiving feedback well doesn't mean you always have to take the feedback. I'm going to say that again. Right? This is a misconception that we have, because sometimes people think that, oh, well, I have to do everything that somebody said. And that's not true. Receiving feedback well doesn't mean you always have to take the feedback. Receiving it well means engaging in the conversation skillfully and making thoughtful choices about whether and how to use the information and what you are learning. It's about managing your emotional triggers, right? So that you can take in what the other person is telling you and being open to seeing yourself in new ways. Right? So when somebody is giving you feedback, like I said before, the receiver is in control of what they're going to take in. So if you're getting feedback, you're in control of what you're going to receive, of what you're hearing and what you want to learn, the takeaways that you want to take away with that. But having that successful conversation means there's been an exchange of ideas, an exchange of situations, and like, oh, okay, and then going back and then thinking about, how am I going to take the information that I just was told and how am I going to implement that? Or are there things that I need to implement or not? Sometimes the feedback that you're getting, you might not be in a place to implement it right now. But you've been told, and there's a seed that's been planted. Because you might be working on something else, right? So if you're working on something else and then you get another thing to work on, well, you don't have to take that feedback right then and there. You can go, okay, I'm going to mark that down. I'm going to make a mental note, but I need to still focus on this because this is kind of like overwhelming me right now. Once you have mastered the thing that you're working on, then you can move on to the next thing. But that doesn't mean that feedback and instructions and encouragement and all of that stuff is going to stop just because you're working on this one thing, okay? You're going to be, like I said, you're constantly getting feedback every single day, whether you realize it or not. Okay? So we have to be able to kind of pick and choose and see, all right, what am I going to deal with today? What am I going to take? What am I going to implement today? Okay? All right. If you receive feedback that's hurtful, spend a little time trying to figure out why they said what they said by putting yourself in their shoes. A lot of times, we don't have the conversation soon enough. And when we don't have that conversation soon enough, frustration builds, and then things are said and blurted out at bad times, right? And they can be said in a way that's really hurtful. So when that happens, just take a moment, just go, okay, thank you for your feedback. I'm gonna think about that. And then, go home and just spend some time and go, okay, why did they say it the way they said that? Try to read past, because we're all learning, we're all growing, and sometimes things are said in a tone that is just not a good tone. But in order to be a good receiver of feedback, you want to be able to teach yourself how to see past and hear past tone and attitude. What are they really saying? And how can I change my behavior, or how can I communicate in a better way so that it's meeting their needs and also meeting my needs? Okay? Because none of us are going to be perfect, right? I think all of us have said one or two things that's been kind of hurtful to some people, right?
Yeah.
Right? Am I the only one? Okay.
No.
Some of you people are like, I'm just looking straight ahead. I'm not saying anything. Okay. Right? But we've all said hurtful things, right?
Yeah.
Intentionally or even unintentionally. So, but again, when we're the ones that say it, yes, we want to apologize, but if we're the receiver, again, don't take it personal. obviously this has been on their mind and they are frustrated. So it's like, okay, sometimes you just have to be that listening board, all right? Let me give you an example here. So let me just give you an example. Stephen Scott, this gentleman, he was working at a company, and one of his bosses told him he was the biggest disappointment in his entire career. Like, wow. Like, can you imagine your boss saying that to you? It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Okay? After thinking about this statement, okay, so after thinking about this statement, Stephen started thinking about his behavior and what he was doing. Like, why would my manager say something like that to me? And it finally dawned on him that his boss said that because he was hurt. The manager was hurt. And the reason why the manager was hurt was because Mr. Scott was moonlighting for other departments without his boss's approval. And that started to affect his work. And his boss felt betrayed and felt disappointed. Now, his boss could have communicated that better. We can all agree on that, right? But once Mr. Scott figured out that he never asked his manager if he could help and moonlight and work for other departments or, in another job, that changed how he approached his next job and his next relationship with his manager. He never again did another job without getting his direct supervisor's approval in doing another job for another person or a department or anything like that, right? So that's what I'm saying is, like, when somebody says something really hurtful, we got to take that moment and take that time to really go, why did they say that? What happened? What did I do that made them feel that way or think that way? And sometimes you got to dig deep, right? It's like, oh man, what did I do? They said that. Because a lot of times when you're hurt, you say things that might not always be clear, right? And so this is why we want to do, we want to, when we're hurt, say things better and kind of take that time to really think about, all right, is this something that I need to talk about, or is this something that I need to work within myself, right? And that's where Holy Spirit comes in. Holy Spirit's your partner, right? Since we're getting a whole bunch of feedback all throughout the day, we get feedback at home, we go to work, we get feedback at work from our coworkers, our boss, and then we get feedback while we're driving, right? Sometimes you cut somebody off, that person wants to tell you you're number one. That's feedback, right? And then we get home, and then we're getting feedback from our children and from our spouses, okay? And so you want to make sure that you're giving feedback and you're receiving feedback in a way that is constructive, okay? And let's see this. So, and then the last one is who gives feedback. Who gives feedback is going to determine whether you're going to receive it or not. That's just truth, okay? And like I said, it's not always based on position, okay? It's not always based on authority. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not the case, right? So you want to be in a place where you can receive feedback from anyone at any time, regardless of how they feel or not. That's when you know that you're a good receiver of feedback. Is that somebody could be yelling and screaming and getting all cussing at you and all that stuff, and you're like, okay, all right, tell me more. Sometimes some people want to be like, well, click, but it's like, I understand that you're really upset. Tell me more. Why is this making you upset? What's going on? That's how you know that you're a good receiver of feedback, when you're saying, tell me more, when somebody's really upset. Because a lot of times we're like, okay, I want to get out of here as fast as I can, right? Right? But, so we want to make sure that we're good givers of feedback so that when people give us feedback or when we give feedback, people can receive it well, right? Okay. All right. So I'm going to end this by saying this. The more information you get, the better you can filter and sort through it all to help you grow and learn from those situations. Okay? So this was just a very basic outline and gave you some tips on how to give feedback and how to receive feedback. I highly encourage you to do your own research and learn how to be a giver of good feedback and a receiver of feedback, okay? One of the books that I got was Thanks for the Feedback, the Science and Art of Receiving Feedback Well. And then here are some internet sources that I found about giving feedback, like how to build people's confidence and ability, being able to give productive feedback, and then productive feedback that helps employees improve. And some of these tips that they give, you can pretty much implement them in any area of your life, all right? And like I said, successful feedback describes your actions or behaviors that an individual can do something about. And that's why you want to make sure that your main focus is, and motivation is, I want to see this person succeed, right? I want to see this person grow. That's why we want to give feedback. Just like how on Sunday we were talking about prophecy, the motivation of prophecy is love, right? Well, giving feedback, motivation should be love.
Yep.
Because love wants to see people grow. Love wants to see people succeed.
Yep.
Okay? All right. Any questions?
You had a comment.
Yes. Yes, sir.
In taking this around as how it fits something that has happened for me as far as receiving personal feedback is I'm trying to learn how to shelf things.
Mm-hmm.
If I hear something that doesn't sit with me, rather than discard it, is to put it on the shelf until later on, when I might can pull it off the shelf.
Yeah.
The other thing was, when you're talking about practice receiving feedback from different sources. Recently, I went through that with a 10-year-old, with Amelia, where I actually sat back and said, just her and I were together, and I said, let's talk about something. I said, let me know how you feel about something. I was shocked at how mature some of her feedback was.
Yeah.
And it kind of startled me a little bit because I thought, that's right. I can see why she sees that. So I think that's very important. It's not to eliminate just because you may not think you can receive from somebody.
Exactly. Because the whole point is we're getting feedback from a lot of people all day long, and you want to be able to receive that feedback from regardless of who that person is. Yes, the person giving feedback, how you receive it might sway you or encourage you to receive from them, but we should be able to, we want to come to a place, I'm going to say it like this, we want to come to a place where we can receive regardless of who the person is, right? Because we ourselves want to grow, right? And I want to go back to that comment that you said about shelving things. Journaling is a great way to address something that you are acknowledging but not ready to actually work on, because you can journal it and then you can go back to that later on. But sometimes when we put shelves, I forget stuff. But journaling is a really great way, and also you can allow the Lord to kind of speak into that a little bit more. And so that's a really great way to kind of shelve things. Like, okay, I heard this today. I don't know what that really means. Lord, open my eyes. And but you've acknowledged it. And see, that's a way of receiving feedback, is that acknowledgement. You might not be ready to implement something on it, but you've acknowledged it. And that's step one. Right? Anybody else? Oh. You guys all ready to be good givers of feedback? Good receivers of feedback? You have something? Yes, Pat.
Well, it was something that the certain scriptures started coming to me as you were speaking, and one of them was exhort one another daily. So when you go into evaluating, go in with that heart of exhortation, and then the other one is agree quickly with thy adversary. You have them right there. So when they're yelling at you and stuff, you go, you know what? I can see why you said that. Just agreeing with them kind of diffuse that anger and stuff that they have.
Oh yeah.
Difference between peace.
Yeah. I had that happen to me. When I was in my job, first 3 months or so, we were recruiting, and I was making a lot of mistakes, and had a faculty member use the head, and he came into my office and he was upset. And I could tell he was upset, and he just came right to my desk and he's like, "You're making a lot of mistakes." And I had a decision to make. Like, am I going to admit, yeah, I'm making a lot of mistakes? Or am I going to try and make excuses? Right? Because a knee-jerk reaction is making excuses. But, that wasn't going to help the situation. So I just said, yes, you're right. And he was just like, he was so surprised that I said that. He was like, oh, okay, well, as long as you, it was kind of like, well, as long as you know, I'm going. It was like, it just diffused the whole situation, because he was right. And I had to acknowledge that. I was like, yes, I know, I am making a lot of mistakes, and it's bothering me just as much as it's bothering you. And I am trying to do better. And it just completely diffused it. And then I had to tell my boss, I was like, well, I just want to let you know what's going on. I started crying. I hate crying at work, but, but, you have great favor with your boss when he's like, oh, keep doing it. Just keep bugging him. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Stop it. It's like, no. But, yeah, a lot of times when we are receiving feedback, and I didn't say this, but in giving feedback and receiving feedback, you want to have a humble attitude, because you don't see everything. You don't see why are the leaders, the president, all the way down to the managers, why are they making the decisions that they're making? You don't see all of that, right? You see your part, your job, and how it's going to affect you. Now, you can bring up, like if there is a change at your job and it's going to affect your job and how you do something, that's where you ask clarifying questions. You go, okay, I see how you want to implement that, but did you do you understand how it can affect this? And when this happens, what do you want us to do about that? So you're not criticizing them in a way of like, well, that's a stupid decision. That's gonna change how we do everything. They're gonna be like, you know what? If you don't like it, leave. Right? But when you come with a humble attitude and going, okay, I see how you want us to implement that change is going to affect this. What do we do about this? And, or you can actually, what's really good and better is to actually come up with solutions yourself. This change is going to affect this. I don't know if you have any ideas, but what about this? You know, you're not just pointing out the problems of a new change, but you're actually helping the whole company or your department or your section or, you know, whatever, whatever situation you're in, okay? Because, you know, I've been in a lot of meetings and I've been in a lot of places where they implement things and I'm like, really? Do you even understand? You know, it's like, you know, you go in and like, do you even understand like what that's gonna do? And all, you know, and it's like, but having that attitude never accomplishes anything and it doesn't change a thing. Because again, managers, leaders, they get defensive and they're just like, you know what, just deal with it. But we want feedback to be what? A conversation, an exchange of ideas to help grow, not only just grow yourself, but grow the company. All right? Praise the Lord. So this kind of partners with the session that we went over at the beginning of the month about communication styles and learning your communication style, but also being able to adapt your communication style for different people. Right? This kind of plays into that. Sometimes some people you can give direct feedback, others you kind of have to be a little softer when you give feedback. Right? Any questions? No? All right. Well, praise the Lord.